On a rainy Thursday morning in Sheffield, Officer Robert Thompson pulled his police car into the station parking lot. He had been on the force for 15 years and knew every corner of the building like the back of his hand. His coffee cup sat, steaming in the holder as he checked his phone for the third time that morning. He was tired, stressed about his mortgage payments, and dealing with his teenage daughter who had been giving him grief for weeks. He saw a black woman approaching the main entrance wearing a long coat and carrying a briefcase. Without looking up from his phone, Robert called out, "Hey, stop right there. This entrance is for police officers only." The woman paused and reached into her pocket. "I work here," said Emily Williams in a calm, steady voice. Robert finally looked up, his eyes narrow with irritation. "I've been here 15 years, love. I know every face in this building, never seen you before." His tone was sharp and dismissive, the kind he used with people he thought didn't belong. Emily stood quietly, holding her identification card. "Perhaps you should look more carefully, Officer Thompson." She glanced at his name badge, memorizing it. "Don't tell me what to do," Robert snapped. He stepped closer, using his height to tower over her. "I don't care what card you're waving around, rules are rules. And in my experience, people like you always think rules don't apply to them." The rain continued to fall, creating small rivers on the sidewalk. Emily felt each drop hitting her shoulders, but she stood firm. "Officer Thompson, I've dealt with men like you before. Men who think their badge gives them the right to treat people as less than human." Robert's face reddened with anger. "Watch your mouth!" He grabbed her arm roughly, squeezing hard enough to leave marks. "You don't know who you're talking to." Emily pulled her arm away, maintaining eye contact. "I know exactly who you are, Officer Thompson, and soon you'll know exactly who I am too." Without warning, Robert turned his head and spat on the ground, but a gust of wind caught the spit, and some of it landed on Emily's shoe. He noticed what happened but didn't apologize. Instead, he smirked and said, "Oops, must be more careful where I aim." His words dripped with sarcasm. Emily looked down, at her shoe, then back at Robert. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a tissue, carefully cleaning her shoe. The simple act somehow made Robert feel small, though he couldn't explain why. "I will remember this moment, Officer Thompson," Emily said quietly. Her voice carried something that made Robert uncomfortable, though he couldn't name it. "I will remember it very clearly." She turned and walked to the side entrance, the one reserved for high-ranking officials. Robert watched her go, confused. Who did she think she was? He'd never seen that entrance used except by the chief himself. The rain picked up and Robert hurried inside, shaking off the water from his jacket. In the break room, he poured another coffee and grumbled to his colleague, "What's this place coming to? Random people thinking they can just walk into a police station." "Who are you talking about?" asked Constable William Smith, looking up from his newspaper. "Some woman in a fancy coat, probably here to file a complaint about nothing." "They always are," Robert muttered, stirring his coffee aggressively. The morning briefing was called 15 minutes later. Robert trudged into the room, his mood not improving. He slumped into his usual chair at the back, half listening as Sergeant George Davies spoke about department changes. "And now," George announced, his voice rising with excitement, "I'm proud to introduce someone special. After 6 months of searching, our department finally has a new leader. Please welcome Chief Emily Williams." The room erupted in applause, but Robert's hands remained frozen around his coffee cup. His heart dropped into his stomach as Emily walked to the front of the room. She was wearing the same long coat, carrying the same briefcase, but now everyone in the room knew exactly who she was. Emily scanned the room, her eyes finding Robert in the back row. She didn't smile, didn't frown, didn't show any emotion at all. But Robert knew she remembered. Of course she remembered. How could she forget? "Thank you all for your warm welcome," Emily began, her voice steady and authoritative. "I'm looking forward to working with each of you to make positive changes in our community. Our job is to serve and protect everyone equally, regardless of their background or appearance." As she spoke about reform and accountability, Robert felt his face burning with shame. Every word she said seemed aimed directly at him, even though she never once looked in his direction again. The coffee in his cup had gone cold, but he couldn't move to drink it. When the briefing ended, officers filed out of the room, chatting excitedly about their new chief. Robert stayed in his seat, staring at the empty stage where Emily had stood. For the first time in his 15-year career, he wondered if he truly deserved to wear the badge on his chest. The end. The next morning, Robert arrived at the station early, hoping to avoid everyone. He parked his car in the far corner of the way lot and slipped in through the side door. His head throbbed from a sleepless night spent replaying the events of yesterday. Emily Williams had already made changes. New signs hung on the walls. Community first, respect always. A suggestion box appeared near the front desk. The old complaint forms had been replaced with simpler ones that anyone could understand and fill out easily. Robert kept his head down as he walked to his desk. Other officers chatted about Chief Williams over coffee. "She's nothing like old Chief Harrison," said Officer David Miller. "Did you see how she shook everyone's hand yesterday, even the cleaning staff? Heard she comes from community policing. In Manchester," added Constable Peter Johnson. "Reduced complaints by 60% there. People actually started inviting officers to neighborhood meetings." Robert pretended to study crime reports while listening. His stomach churned with each positive comment about the new chief. At lunch, he sat alone in his car eating a sandwich without tasting it. That afternoon, Sergeant George Davies knocked on Robert's desk. "Thompson, Chief Williams wants to see you in her office, now." Robert's hands trembled slightly as he stood. Every eye in the room followed him as he walked to the chief's office. The door had a new nameplate. Chief Emily Williams, Open Door Policy. He knocked twice before hearing, "Come in." Emily sat behind her desk reading through a stack of papers. Her office looked different than before, warmer somehow. Family photos lined one shelf. Books about community policing filled another. A small plant sat by the window. "Sit down, Officer Thompson," she said without looking up. Robert sat stiffly, his back straight, hands on his knees. The chair felt too comfortable for this conversation. Emily finally looked up, removing her reading glasses. "I've been reviewing files since yesterday evening. Yours makes for interesting reading." The file on her desk was thick. Robert could see complaint forms sticking out of the edges. 6 formal complaints in 3 years, Emily continued, pulling out specific papers. "Mrs. Sarah Johnson says you called her son a troublemaker for riding his bicycle in his own neighborhood. Mr. Khan's restaurant received multiple warnings for noise, but other establishments on the same street received none." Robert opened his mouth to respond, but Emily raised her hand. "Then there are the informal complaints, the ones that disappeared before reaching anyone important." She set down the papers and leaned back in her chair. "Do you know why I left my position in Manchester to come here?" "No, ma'am," Robert replied quietly. "Because my father was a police officer. He served the city for 30 years. And toward the end of his career, he hated putting on his uniform. Every morning, not because of criminals or dangerous situations, but because of officers like you who made everyone fear the badge instead of respect it." Robert felt his face burning. "Chief Williams, yesterday morning you saw a black woman in a coat and immediately assumed she didn't belong. You didn't ask for identification first. You didn't introduce yourself professionally. You grabbed my arm and spat on my shoe." Her voice remained calm, but each word hit like a hammer. "What if I had been a lawyer representing a complaint against the department? What if I had been a judge coming to review our procedures?" "I was having a bad morning," Robert mumbled. "We all have bad mornings, Officer Thompson. The difference is that some of us manage to treat people with basic respect, despite them." Emily stood and walked to the window. "This department has a problem, a culture problem. Officers who think their badge gives them permission to act however they want, especially toward certain communities." She turned to face him directly. "I'm giving you 2 choices. You can transfer to another station if they'll have you. Or you can stay here and prove that you can change." "I need this job," Robert said quickly. "My daughter, my mortgage, then show me you deserve it." Emily returned to her desk. "Starting tomorrow, you'll work with community liaison programs. You'll attend sensitivity training every Thursday evening. And most importantly, you'll learn that protection means serving everyone equally. Robert nodded slowly. What about what happened yesterday? Yesterday taught me who needs the most help in this department. Consider this your educational opportunity, not your punishment. She picked up her glasses and returned to her papers. That's all, Officer Thompson. We start fresh tomorrow. Robert stood to leave, pausing at the door. Chief Williams? Yes? I apologize for yesterday. Emily looked up one last time. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to every person you've mistreated while wearing that uniform. And then do better. Robert closed the door behind him, feeling both relief and dread. He had kept his job, but now came the hard part, changing everything about how he did it. Outside the office, Sergeant Davies waited. How did it go? I've got a second chance, Robert replied quietly. Use it wisely, George said, patting his shoulder. Chief Williams doesn't give many of those. Robert nodded, understanding that his real work was just beginning. The community. Center's parking lot was half full when Robert arrived for his first Thursday evening training session. His stomach churned as he sat in his car, watching other officers walk inside. He recognized a few, younger officers who had joined the force in recent years. Inside, the main room had been arranged with chairs in a circle. About 20 people sat waiting, including officers in plain clothes, community members, and some he knew had filed complaints against the department. Robert chose a seat in the back corner, hoping to remain invisible. Good evening, everyone, announced Dr. Sarah Collins, who would lead the sessions. This is not a lecture, this is a conversation. We learn by listening to each other. For the first hour, community members shared their experiences with local police. Mrs. Chen, owner of the corner grocery, described how officers used to make her feel nervous during their frequent visits. They would stand outside talking loudly, making jokes that scared my customers away. A teenage boy named Marcus explained how he'd been stopped 4 times in the past year while walking home from school. They always ask if I've been causing trouble. Sometimes they search my backpack. Why? Because I'm tall and wear a hoodie? Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He remembered stopping kids like Marcus. Just being thorough, he would tell himself. Officer Jennifer Blake spoke next. She was 28, new to the force. When I first started, I noticed how certain neighborhoods got more aggressive policing. Nobody explained why. I just learned to follow what senior officers did. Jennifer glanced at Robert when she said, senior officers. He looked away. Dr. Collins introduced a role-playing exercise. Officers will now experience what it feels like to be stopped and questioned. Robert found himself paired with Constable Harrison Young, a black officer he barely knew. Harrison was asked to play the officer, Robert the civilian. You in the gray coat, Harrison said, walking toward Robert. Stop where you are. Robert stopped, his hands slightly raised. Where are you coming from? What's in your pockets? Why are you in this neighborhood? Harrison's questions came rapid fire, his tone demanding. Even though Robert knew this was practice, his heart raced. Having questions fired at him without explanation felt invasive and threatening. How does that feel? Dr. Collins asked afterward. Strange, Robert admitted. I've never been on this side of questioning before. And you're an officer, Harrison pointed out. Imagine how it feels for regular citizens who don't understand police procedures. During the break, Marcus, the teenager, approached Robert in the hallway. Can I ask you something? Sure, Robert replied hesitantly. My little brother wants to be a police officer when he grows up. He's 9. Should I tell him to find a different dream? Marcus's question caught Robert off guard. Why would you ask that? Because every time I see an officer, I feel scared, not safe. Is that how a 9-year-old should feel about his future? Robert had no answer. He thought about his own daughter, Lucy. She'd always been proud when she told friends her dad was a police officer, but lately she'd stopped mentioning it at school. The second half of the session focused on communication techniques. They practiced de-escalation strategies, learning phrases that could calm situations instead of inflame them. Instead of what are you doing here? Dr. Collins suggested. Try good afternoon, I'm Officer Thompson. I'm just checking on the neighborhood. Is everything okay? They also discussed cultural sensitivity. Mr. Kumar, who ran the local restaurant, explained religious customs officers should understand. During prayer times, we can't immediately respond to questions. This doesn't mean we're being disrespectful. Robert scribbled notes furiously. He'd lived in Sheffield his whole life but realized how little he understood about the diverse communities he served. After the session, Emily Williams appeared at the door. She'd been quietly observing from the back for the last hour. Officer Thompson, she called out. A word? Robert hung back as others filed out. When they were alone, Emily asked, What did you learn tonight? That I've been doing my job wrong for years, Robert answered honestly. That's a start, Emily nodded. Knowledge without action changes nothing. The real test comes tomorrow when you're back on the streets. I want to try those new techniques, Robert said. The communication ones. Good, because tomorrow you'll be partnered with Officer Harrison Young. He'll be observing and reporting back to me. Emily handed him a folder. Here's your first community assignment. There's been multiple complaints about aggressive policing at the youth center basketball courts. I want you to help change that. Robert looked at the assignment. Just 2 months ago, he might have seen this as babysitting duty. Now he understood it was an opportunity to rebuild trust. That night, Robert couldn't sleep. Images from the training session kept replaying in his mind. Marcus asking about his brother. Mrs. Chen describing her fear. Jennifer admitting she just followed what senior officers did. Officers like him. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter Lucy. Dad, can we talk tomorrow about my friend Aisha? She says she's scared of police now after something happened. At her house. Robert stared at the message. His own daughter's friend was afraid of police. Afraid of him. He turned off the light and lay in darkness, finally understanding how much damage he'd done and how much work lay ahead. The end. Robert met Harrison Young the next morning in the station's briefing room. Harrison was 26, athletic build, and carried himself with quiet confidence. He'd served 2 years and had received several commendations from the community. Morning, Harrison said, extending his hand. Robert shook it firmly. Ready for youth center duty? Harrison smiled slightly. More than ready. Been meaning to connect with those kids for months. At the youth center, basketball courts buzzed with activity. About 30 teenagers played pickup games while others sat along the sidelines. When Robert's patrol car appeared, the ball stopped, bouncing. Several kids quickly walked inside the building. That's what we're here to change, Harrison said quietly as they parked. They got out slowly, without rushing. Robert noticed how Harrison walked differently than he usually did. Casual, hands visible, moving deliberately. 2 boys, about 15, sat on a bench watching them approach. One immediately tensed, his fists clenching. Afternoon, Harrison said warmly. I'm Officer Young. This is Officer Thompson. We heard there's some good basketball happening here. The boys glanced at each other, surprised by the friendly approach. You play? The taller boy asked cautiously. Used to play in school, Harrison replied. Mind if we watch a bit? Permission was implicitly granted when they didn't object. Robert and Harrison sat on another bench, giving the boys space. They watched the games quietly, occasionally commenting on good shots or clever plays. After 20 minutes, a group of girls approached. One, wearing a basketball jersey, had question marks in her eyes. You're different from the other cops who come here, she observed. How so? Robert asked, genuinely curious. They usually stand by their car, tell us to keep it down. Once they made us leave for loitering. She used air quotes around the last word. This is a youth center, Harrison pointed out. You're supposed to be here. Unless you're doing something dangerous, we don't see any problem. The girl smiled for the first time. I'm Ashley. I run the girls' team. Over the next hour, they learned names, favorite players, and concerns about the upcoming tournament. The manager, Mrs. Johnson, emerged from the building looking skeptical. She'd worked here for 23 years and seen many officers come and go. Officers, she acknowledged warily. Mrs. Johnson, Harrison responded. We understand there have been incidents here. We'd like to help make this place feel safer for everyone. Help how? She challenged. By being present in a positive way, Robert jumped in, not just when problems arise. Mrs. Johnson studied them both. Actions speak louder than words, officers. That afternoon, tensions rose when two boys started arguing over a foul call. In the past, Robert would have immediately stepped in with authority. Instead, Harrison caught his eye and shook his head slightly. The boys' voices rose. The taller one pushed the other's shoulder. Harrison stood slowly. Hey fellas, tough call to make, he said, approaching calmly. Want a neutral opinion? Both boys turned, surprised again by the non-threatening approach. He fouled me, the shorter boy insisted. I barely touched him, the other protested. How about we replay from that spot? Harrison suggested. Sometimes that's the fairest way to settle disputes. The boys agreed, and play resumed peacefully. Robert realized he'd been holding his breath, ready to escalate if needed, but Harrison's methods had worked better. By evening, when the center began closing, several kids approached them before leaving. You coming back tomorrow? Marcus asked. The same boy from the training session. If we're welcome, Robert replied carefully. You're all right, Marcus decided. Just don't turn back into the other cops when you come again. After the kids left, Mrs. Johnson invited them inside for coffee. Her office walls displayed years of photos, kids in graduation gowns, sports teams, community events. I lost my nephew to street violence, she shared quietly. Too many of our kids see police as threats, not protectors. They think their only choices are gangs or trouble. We want to change that, Harrison said sincerely. 3 officers tried before you, Mrs. Johnson continued. They lasted 2 weeks each, decided it was beneath their duties to hang around teenagers playing basketball. Robert felt heat rise to his face, remembering similar thoughts. We'll keep coming, he promised, even if it takes months to build trust. On the drive back to the station, Harrison turned to Robert. You handled things differently today than yesterday's training showed. I'm trying, Robert admitted. It's hard. 20 years of habits die slowly. But they do die, Harrison encouraged. You didn't jump in when those boys argued. Old Robert would have. At the station, Emily Williams waited in the parking lot. She'd received their preliminary report. Mrs. Johnson called, Emily said directly. She says you're the first officers in 3 years who lasted past the first visit without complaints. It's just 1 day, Robert deflected modestly. 1 day becomes 1 week becomes 1 month, Emily replied. Building trust requires consistency. Tomorrow, same assignment. That night, Robert told his daughter about his day. Lucy listened, then asked, Will you take me to meet the basketball kids sometime? You want to go? He asked, surprised. I want to see this new version of you, Dad, she said simply. Robert hugged her tightly, realizing his change at work was changing their relationship at home, too. The end 6 months later, the transformation was remarkable. Robert arrived early at the youth center every Tuesday and Thursday, often bringing donated sports equipment his daughter Lucy helped collect from neighbors. The kids now called him Hoops, after he admitted his terrible basketball skills but kept trying to improve. Today marked the biggest change yet. Lucy sat beside him on the bench watching Ashley's team practice. Several girls gathered around them during a water break. Is this your daughter? Ashley asked, already knowing the answer. Guilty as charged, Robert smiled. She's been wanting to see your famous layup technique. Ashley demonstrated her move while Lucy cheered enthusiastically. The girl who once feared police now regularly messaged Robert about game schedules and team fundraising ideas. Mrs. Johnson announced from the doorway, 20 minutes until our community meeting starts. Officers? We'll be there, Harrison confirmed. The monthly community meetings had become essential bridges between police and residents. They started with Robert's initiative, born from Emily Williams' suggestion to listen before enforcing. In the meeting room, about 50 people gathered. Mr. Kumar sat with other shop owners. The Chen family represented the business district. Marcus, now 17, spoke for the youth perspective alongside his 9-year-old brother James, the boy who still dreamed of becoming an officer. Chief Williams arrived 5 minutes early, a practice she maintained to ensure punctuality set the tone. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began warmly. "Before we address concerns, I want to share some statistics. In our district, complaints against officers have decreased by 72% since January. Emergency response times have improved, but more importantly, community members now regularly offer information that prevents crimes." Robert glanced around the room. 6 months ago, many of these faces wore expressions of distrust and anger. Today, he saw engagement, even cautious hope. Mr. Kumar raised his hand. "The late-night noise complaints are still an issue, but now officers discuss solutions instead of just issuing warnings." "Exactly right," Emily nodded. "Officer Thompson, would you explain our new approach?" Robert stood nervously. Public speaking still challenged him. "We work with business owners to find sound levels that maintain atmosphere without disturbing residents. We test together, adjust together. It's slower, but the agreements last because both sides contribute." After the meeting, Marcus approached, Robert with his younger brother James trailing behind. "James has something to ask," Marcus prompted. James looked up with wide eyes. "Can I ride in your police car someday?" "Absolutely," Robert knelt down. "But first, want to know a secret about being a good officer?" James nodded eagerly. "The best officers listen more than they talk. They help more than they punish. And they never ever forget that their badge means service, not power." Marcus smiled, remembering asking about his brother's dream months ago. "Maybe I was wrong to doubt," he admitted. That evening, Lucy joined Robert for dinner at the station cafeteria. Officers frequently ate with community members now, another policy Emily implemented to break down barriers. "Proud of you, Dad," Lucy said between bites. "For what?" "For changing. It wasn't easy, but you did it." Officer Harrison Young approached their table. "Robert, Chief Williams wants all community policing officers in her office. Says it's important." In Emily's office, 5 officers gathered: Robert, Harrison, Jennifer Blake, and 2 others who'd joined the community program. "Sit down," Emily instructed, her expression unreadable. Robert's heart sank. Had their experiments failed? Were policies changing again? Emily opened a folder. "I've received 73 letters this month, each addressed to me personally." She pulled out several handwritten pages. "They're requests." "Requests for what, Chief?" Harrison asked. "For you 5 to expand the community policing model citywide. The mayor reviewed your results and wants similar programs in every district. Says it's the future of law enforcement." Silence filled the room as the words sank in. "Specifically you, Robert," Emily continued, looking directly at him. "The mayor wants you to train other officers. Says Mrs. Johnson recommended you personally," she told him. "Officer Thompson went from our biggest fear to our greatest ally. If he can change, anyone can." Robert felt emotions surge. Relief, pride, gratitude. "I can't do this alone," he said finally. "I need Harrison, Jennifer, all of us, and community leaders who'll trust us enough to stay patient." Emily smiled, the first genuine smile Robert had seen from her since their first encounter. "That's exactly why you're the right person. You understand it takes a village to police a village." 2 weeks later, on a sunny Tuesday morning, Robert watched as Chief Williams addressed a crowd gathered outside the youth center. Media cameras rolled as she unveiled a new plaque: "Community Partnership Building, where trust transforms." James tugged Robert's sleeve. "When I become a police officer, I'll be just like you." "No, James," Robert corrected gently. "Be better." As music played and kids shot hoops, Robert looked at his hands, the same hands that once grabbed Emily Williams' arm in anger. Now they passed basketballs to giggling children, helped elderly Mrs. Chen with her groceries, and shook hands with former adversaries. 6 months ago, spit had landed on his new chief's shoe, an act of casual cruelty born from prejudice and power abuse. Today, that same chief gave him the highest commendation an officer could receive: the community's trust. Change wasn't instant. It demanded humility, persistence, and the courage to admit fault. But surrounding Robert now was proof that yesterday's worst actions could become tomorrow's greatest transformations. Hope lived here, in every child's smile and every resident's wave. And if Officer Robert Thompson could change, then perhaps the whole system could too. The end.